Colorado's Supreme Court debates what makes for an insurrection.
I think the duration has to be longer than 3 hours.
Donald Trump's attorneys making it sound like a Cialis commercial. We asked Colorado's Republican chairman about his talk of a coming civil war. Making Colorado's prisons compliant with disabilities law would be really expensive, so they're just asking for enough money to fend off the lawsuits. And what's up with the creepy new cameras watching people park in Denver?
This is a technology that we're testing to see if we can use them to make city streets safer.
And migrants want to work legally, so they aren't relying on handouts. So let's help them apply for work permits and solve the problem. Because you don't just watch. This is next. Colorado Supreme Court justices heard today that the pro-Trump mob beating police officers and storming the Capitol was not an insurrection because it didn't last more than 3 hours. Sounded like the warning from an erectile dysfunction ad, but it was an actual argument from Trump's attorneys in this nationally watched case of electile dysfunction. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger was in the courtroom.
It is riot.
How would you define insurrection?
Part of my whole thesis is that we can't define it.
The legal team for former President Trump argued in front of the Colorado Supreme Court today to get the justices to reverse a lower court ruling that Trump engaged in an insurrection. Trump won that lower court ruling that determined, despite insurrection, he was still eligible for the Colorado ballot because the 14th Amendment that could disqualify him because of insurrection did not apply to the president. His attorney's definition of insurrection got an audible response from one of the justices.
I think the duration has to be longer than 3 hours. I think the geographical scope has to be broader than one building. And you say, well, that was the U.S. Capitol. True. It wasn't the Pentagon. It wasn't. It was a singular node. The goal wasn't to nullify governmental authority and set up an alternative government.
Several questions need to be decided by Colorado's Supreme Court, like did Colorado courts have the power to hear the case in the first place?
Did the district court have jurisdiction is a pretty fundamental question here.
Colorado has enacted an election code that gives district courts, including specifically in presidential primary elections like we have here, the authority to conduct the qualification disputes.
The reason Trump's team appealed is because the lower court deemed him an insurrectionist and then argued that if voters choose someone to be president, that cannot be insurrection.
So if everyone chose an insurrectionist, Jefferson Davis, let's use that example. If Jefferson Davis ran a while ago, and the electors who were not themselves insurrectionists chose to put him into the presidency, that would be fine under Section 3, and that would be consistent with the purposes of Section 3.
That would be the rule of democracy in work.
Jefferson Davis being the Confederate president and Section 3 of the 14th Amendment being passed and ratified right after the Civil War. Clearly, the group trying to disqualify Trump appealed to overturn that lower court ruling that kept him on the ballot. But Trump's team appealed to nullify that insurrection part of the lower court ruling. I asked his attorney under what circumstances would they again appeal, this time to the U.S. Supreme Court.
If the Colorado Supreme Court decides that Trump should not be allowed on the ballot and the people should not have that opportunity to vote for him, we'll likely appeal that to the U.S. Supreme Court.
And attorney Scott Gessler told me they would not appeal if Trump is kept on the ballot, but the insurrectionist label is also kept on Trump.
It's fascinating, though, because the Denver judge decided, listen, this thing in the Constitution, this was just for the Confederate insurrectionists. Yet here the Trump team is in court basically saying, like, well, yeah, if America wanted to elect the Confederate insurrectionists, then they should have been able to.
And that's another part of this is the definition of what is the office of the president, and does that title fit under this part of the amendment? Because is the president an office of or an office under? It's ridiculous, the small language that has to be debated, because we can't ask the people from 200 years ago what they meant by that language. Yeah. Coincidence or irony, this has to be decided by the Colorado Supreme Court by January 6th.
Yeah, I don't know if that's coincidence or irony. I'm always bad on which is which, but I do know that if it's more than 3 hours, you got to call your doctor. Marshall, thank you. Colorado's Republican Party chairman says his recent talk of civil war, if so-called election fraud doesn't stop, is not an attempt to pave the way for political violence. GOP Chair Dave Williams does not respond to any of our questions, so Marshall tracked him down outside court today.
Are you normalizing political violence in Colorado?
We don't see it that way. There are systematic problems with our election system with respect to ballot harvesting, with signature verification, and dirty voter rolls. I think generally what I was saying is that if we don't have a good election system that's full of integrity, then we're going to risk solving disputes away from the ballot box, and history will show that people may take up arms, and that's something we should avoid.
Do you need to be explicit right now that you are not suggesting any kind of violence around the Colorado election?
No one's suggesting that, not even me, and I don't think any mainstream Republicans doing that.
Williams and the Colorado Republican Party he leads are unapologetic about their election denial, but their rhetoric really has taken a turn in recent weeks, with Williams telling a white nationalist podcaster that Colorado does not have any fair elections, and the Colorado GOP saying that our state's elections are rigged. The paramedics who injected Elijah McClain with ketamine tell one story, and body camera video of that night tells a different story. The paramedics initially claimed that McClain was fighting officers. That's not on the video.
There was a couple of times that I approached the patient, tried to ask him some questions as far as a name, any kind of medical problems, but never got any kind of sensical language back as an answer.
The body cams played for the jury in the paramedics trial today do not show either paramedic trying to talk to Elijah McClain, except for when Jeremy Cooper asked officers if McClain spoke English. Cooper and the other paramedic, Peter Jachuniak, face charges for reckless manslaughter and assault. The trial is now on hold until Friday. The judge dismissed a sick juror today, and another juror may have come down with COVID. The Colorado Department of Corrections is asking for more than $2 million in funding to bring their facilities a little more in line with the Disabilities Act. Not anywhere near enough to actually comply with federal requirements in our prisons, but state leaders think the smaller amount of money is at least enough to fend off the lawsuits. Today, the Department of Corrections asked state legislators to set aside $2.7 million in their next budget for Disabilities Act compliance. $600,000 of it would pay for sign language interpreters and assistive technology. The DOC is required to provide that because of settlements reached in lawsuits with blind and deaf inmates last year. The DOC says the remaining $2 million would be used to patch up ADA compliance at its facilities and, quote, avoid future litigation. Disability Law Colorado is a legal advocacy group that works on behalf of inmates with disabilities or mental illness. They say even if they're taking these accessibility issues to court, inmates still have to wait years to get a resolution.
If you're the person who's there suffering today and you can't have contact with your family because they don't have the right assistive technology, or you're in isolation because of your schizoaffective disorder and delusions, and that's making you deteriorate further, even if we filed a lawsuit tomorrow, those people would not get relief probably for at least a couple of years.
During a budget hearing today, state legislators said they're concerned that this proposal from the state's prison system leaves the state open to litigation. Migrants who have come to Colorado have told us here over and over they don't want handouts, they want to be able to work to provide for their families. There is a legal pathway for thousands of migrants in Colorado to do that, but it can be confusing and expensive. Your Word of Thanks microgiving campaign this week will help set up legal clinics to assist migrants going through the process to get work authorization so they can work and be self-sufficient. Migrants from Venezuela can apply for what's called Temporary Protected Status, TPS. It's permission to stay and work here because of violence in Venezuela. Other migrants can apply for work authorization. The Newcomers Fund, you know them, we've supported them before. They're helping to set up legal clinics that are going to guide migrants through the process. Attorneys sitting there one-on-one with people. They estimate 5,500 migrants who intend to stay in Colorado are eligible for this permission to work. They have the funding to help some of them, but not all of them. The Newcomers Fund is run by the nonprofit Rose Community Foundation, which is covering all of the expenses. So that means that every dollar that we raise goes to help migrants get their work authorization so they can support their families. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. We'll send you that link to donate. You've proven that even $5 adds up fast, so as always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 to get us rolling. Migrants in Colorado say they want to work, And doing it legally protects both them and their employers. We can help get thousands of people through that process so they can do what they want to do. Go to work, support their families.
It'll snap a picture if someone parks in the back bike lane, send that data to us along with, location, time of day, things like that.
Hey, creepy new cameras downtown. They're watching how you park. And Colorado convinces the feds to consider a huge passenger rail project on the Front Range and kick in some cash. Colorado's plan to build passenger rail service along the Front Range has made the cut today for a federal grant program that's eventually going to invest billions of dollars into selected rail projects around the country. The Front Range Rail Project would run Fort Collins to Pueblo. Advocates eventually wanted to connect in New Mexico and Wyoming. Planners say a bare-bones version still about a decade away and would cost $2 billion. That's if the passenger trains go on existing tracks and only run a few times per day. Colorado's plan is one of several proposals just selected for a federal grant program, which is giving out $500,000 for various planning studies. That'll help the feds decide which projects they're going to fund big time. That federal taxpayer money, if we were to get it, would go into the pot with state and local taxpayer dollars. Planners here are already polling whether there's support for a sales tax hike to build that passenger rail. Chris Bianchi, what a warm day today. The overused cliche is always the warm before the storm, but it does seem to get warm around here in the winter before, bam, you get snow.
And there is science behind that, Kyle. I'm going to explain that. So first of all, today, 71 degrees, our latest 71-degree reading in Denver since 1981. December is normally our coldest month of the year here in Denver. But on Friday, we're going to drop down to 18 degrees. So what's with this? What is going on with why it gets so warm right before it snows? First things first, basic geography. For us in Colorado, we're obviously a long ways away from an ocean. So that's the starting point. We're also at elevation. And water is a moderating impact on temperatures. And we've got this kind of jet stream pattern, kind of wavy. Notice how it's just kind of wavy, dipping and stuff like that. It means we've got a big ridge of high pressure right here, big area of low pressure somewhere else, and in between, you've got that snow. And this kind of wavy pattern is what lends to getting those sorts of snow. So ridge high pressure, then right behind it, you've got some low pressure. Hopefully that kind of makes sense, about as quick as I could put it. But weather is always Mother Nature trying to balance itself on out. That's the way to kind of think of it. And so when you got really hot weather somewhere, you got really cold somewhere else, that's the kind of dynamic that's in play. In the meantime, part of that is, by the way, those strong winds. And the foothills above 8,000 feet in elevation could be talking about wind gusts up to 80 miles an hour. The worst of the winds can be tomorrow morning, and I'm pretty concerned about this, especially, again, above 8,000 feet in elevation. Boulder and the west side of the metro area, 50, maybe 60 mile an hour winds. Again, the worst of it will be on Thursday morning, tomorrow morning. Cold front moves through late tomorrow. Then we get that snow for Friday. At this point, it doesn't look as substantial as it was looking last night. That said, we're looking at the potential for a few inches of snow. This would mainly be during the day. On Friday, it should taper down Friday night into Saturday morning. 7-day forecast. Once we get past that, it stays kind of chilly for Saturday. And then early next week, temperatures in the 30s and 40s for a high with lots of sunshine, especially Sunday and Monday.
Denver is watching us in a new way, preparing to give out tickets based on what the cameras see. A Next viewer was recently looking at these new curb poles in Denver, and the poles were looking back. Embedded cameras. A note from that viewer led our Steve Stager to find out about the city's little-known new parking enforcement.
I noticed these sort of nondescript gray posts.
Not out of the ordinary in a downtown until Rob Toffness took a closer look.
Kind of looked like they had a Raspberry Pi and maybe a camera in them, so I was curious, what they were for and what they were collecting.
He wondered, what the heck are these things?
Well, I actually thought they might be related to one of the stories you had done with the cell phone pings downtown, and we were checking to see how vibrant downtown was.
Nope.
These are called safety sticks.
Nancy Kuhn with Denver's Department of Transportation says they're actually a parking enforcement tool being tested out in 3 parts of downtown, in spots along bike lanes where people tend to park illegally.
It'll snap a picture if someone parks in the back bike lane, send that data to us along with, location, time of day, things like that.
Makes sense, but Denver's not using them like other cities, at least not yet. They're using them to collect data, like how often people are parking in bike lanes, are there repeat offenders, and what are the worst times.
With that information, what we can do is potentially adjust our routing or have a greater presence in areas that we see that are problem areas.
They aren't issuing tickets.
Right now, we don't have a plan or a method in place to do that direct issuing of tickets that I know some cities are doing. We're exploring all these options, but really no plan in place yet to take that step.
It's frustrating.
Frustrating to Toughness, a bike advocate who notices people parked in bike lanes all the time. Heck, both of the interviews I did today in different areas of downtown spotted people parked in the bike lane. This moving truck is likely still there. No ticket in sight.
Enforcement can't be there all the time, so it was kind of exciting to see an automated solution that could be there all the time.
For Next, I'm Steve Steger.
The city says it hasn't figured out what they're going to do next as a result of these cameras. They did note that parking enforcement officers have issued more tickets this year than last to people parked in bike lanes.
Tonight's next question comes from Tom. He wants to know if Colorado's iconic license plate features some of the state's best-known peaks, or is this just like some random mountain image? And he figured the license plate nerds around here would know.
Yep, Tom, so the state's green and white plates have featured the exact same mountain art since 1960. And DMV says it's not Colorado, it's just some generic mountain range. There are actual Colorado peaks on our new driver's licenses. Those licenses include designs that were submitted through a statewide contest. Front of the license has a photo of Mount Sneffels near Ouray in the San Juans. The back features Sprague Lake at Rocky Mountain National Park. We are back with your first holiday fail of the year. And Marissa has feedback. Her feedback for me today was that I am not old, I'm just out of touch. Honest feedback is a gift. We'll have some next.